I guess we'll start with Jeff and Marcia. This is obviously an extraordinary story. What compelled you to tell it?
Well, we did an earlier film about the three women who pioneered the marriage equality movement. These two small-town lawyers in Vermont and Mary Bonato from Massachusetts. And almost all of the marriage equality movement that has swept the country and much of the world, although we're fighting back now, came from their work, politically, socially, legislatively. And we wanted to tell the story about a couple that came to Vermont for a civil union, which was as married as a same-sex couple could be at the time. We found out that Terrence McNally and his wonderful husband, Tom Curdy, had a civil union in Vermont. We approached a mutual friend, negotiated for 6 or 7 months. They said yes. And prior to even seeing them, we loved Terrence's work, and we sort of said, no one has told a story. How is that possible? If we kind of like him, if he seems compelling, if he's not like, a jerk, let's ask him if we could do a film about him. And then we kind of secretly waited 2 months until it seemed like the right time, and then we asked, and they said yes.
No, I said, you go in their apartment in New York, and it's just one photo after another, and the Tony Awards, and the theater geek that I am, it's like dying to go to heaven. So, and I'd see, I grew up in New York and went to tons of theater, and I'd seen so much of these things, and I realized I really didn't know the man at all. I knew the name and not the man, and we felt it was a story that needed to be told.
What surprised you most along the way as you started doing the research and talking to so many people who have worked with him and adore him?
It was obviously great to make discoveries like we found the Wendy Wasserstein footage in a theater office. They said, we have like about 30 boxes for you to take a look, and they had all these unlabeled tapes, but there's this one that had a date on it that seemed promising, and anyway, something like that, or the Edward Albee footage. Even the Albee Foundation didn't know existed. That was fun. I think, it's amazing to meet someone like Rita Moreno and to have sort of, worshipped them from afar and known them in so many things, and you go, are they going to be like, lord it over you and be unpleasant and, and then they just turn out to be fabulous human beings. Yeah. I mean, we had this little camera malfunction when we were filming with Rita, and someone else might have, made a real fuss of it. She was as gracious to everyone in the room as she could possibly be.
Yeah, but when they left my house.
You can ask her the real story later. Anyway, so I think getting to know people who are brilliant, and I think one thing that carries away is also the incredibly hard work that goes into this line of work. You put everything out on the line, and it gets torn down, and you keep working as a community, and then you accomplish something. And that is so moving.
I would like to say that I was thoroughly immersed. It's probably one of the most wonderful biographical documentaries that I've seen. I loved it. I loved your approach. I loved your understanding of him. I loved your affection for him. And your understanding of him in many different ways, some positive and some not so positive. I mean, because he does look like a fucking angel, but he's a devil. We know this about Terrence, right? Which is very interesting. I was so interested in your talking about that as an actress. It just happens that, first of all, do you know how he got to write Googie Gomez?
Yes.
Yes, but you tell the story, because we know there's a great story.
Okay, but remind me, I'm 86, so I forget stuff.
You were at the party.
Remind me why I'm starting the story in the first place. Okay.
You were at a party, just remember, you were at a party.
No, that I remember.
Everybody
It's the point I'm
smoking.
trying to make now about his being so insistent on punctuation. But initially, I was doing a play on Broadway. In fact, I replaced Linda Lavin in The Last of the Red Hot Lovers. Anyway, Jimmy and I became very close, laughed a lot, and we dearly, dearly loved each other. And I used to do this character that I used to do. I invented her when I was doing West Side Story, the film. And you know how dancers are when they make, when they have 10 minutes off, they do two things. One is they light a cigarette, which they're still doing, it's amazing. And they do bits to try to amuse each other on these 10 minutes off. And one day, this person came out of me, and I got up, we were all on the floor smoking, and I got up and I said, okay, is this Puerto Rican girl who's auditioning for a bus and truck of Gypsy. And I literally went into, I had a dream. And they broke up, I broke up. So from then on, I used to do her a lot. She didn't have a name, she didn't have a history, she just was. And then I used to do her all the time, and then backstage when we were doing Las Red Hot Lovers, somehow I'd always end up talking like this, you know, with an attitude and all that. And at a party that Jimmy gave, Terrence McNally was there. I didn't even know who he was. And Jimmy said, Rita, do that crazy Puerto Rican that you do sometimes. And I said, oh, okay, because I love doing her. I just loved doing her. And I said, okay, this is the Player King speech from Hamlet. And I started with, "Big the which I pray you," and with such import. That's her whole thing. You know, she's always full of herself. As I pronounce it, and then I did the Hiawatha from the Charsagiji Woman. And I remember we were in the bedroom of Jimmy's house, and Jimmy was, Terrence was sitting on the bed, and he really nearly fell off he laughed so hard. And you know, people who write funny stuff don't laugh hard. Anyway, at the end of the evening, he said to me, I'm telling you right now, I am going to write a part for that character. And I thought I should be so lucky that never happened to me. And about 6 months later, somebody stopped my husband on 42nd and 8th or something. And they said, has Rita received the script yet? And he said, what script? And he said, it's called The Tubs. And I got the script a few days later, and I remember reading it at night while Lenny, my husband, was trying to sleep, and he kept waking up because the bed kept shaking. It was really funny. And I could hear this character that I invented. She was then called Rita Googie Gomez. Anyway, now back to, I actually remembered why I told the story. You don't know how amazing that is. But you will. I was the only actor in that production who never got that speech because for whatever reasons, I had the rhythms exactly right. But then again, I'm thinking he had my rhythms. He remembered what I did, even though I was doing the Player King speech, he remembered my rhythms as this character, because it just flowed out of me. This was like almost a cold reading. We just did something at the Schubert office, and it came out exact, and it never changed in that sense. So I never got that, because I understood, as with Neil Simon, that there is a certain rhythm that you really must observe when you're doing those particular playwrights' dialogues.
Justin, did you ever get the speech?
No, I think Terrence, there was, he could occasionally, but I never saw it because Joe Mantello could be enough of an asshole and a taskmaster. That's what I got mostly yelled at by Joe. But we
Well, Joe's good at that.
Yeah, that's really true. And somehow you forgive it, I guess.
I wouldn't.
No, I don't know why I said that.
I mean, an asshole is an asshole, right? Even though immensely talented.
I think he just was very comfortable with fully throwing down in front of everybody. But I love him dearly, and he gave me my start in New York and all that stuff.
Well, he has good taste.
No, that play, that was my second job, Love, Valor, Compassion, in New York. And I had worked with Robbie Bates, who was a couple with Joe at the time. And I remember I was like fairly fresh out of school, working at a hotel, and then I somehow got two jobs at the same time. It could either have been Joe's new play Robbie's new play at Naked Angels, or Love, Valor, Compassion at Manhattan Theater Club. And I took Love, Valor, Compassion because it paid. in Naked Angels, you didn't get paid. And I, had to pay my rent. I lived in the East Village, and so we did that. And then the play went through many changes. It's so crazy to see it. I'm so moved by your film. Really wonderful. And then we were at Manhattan Theater Club for the run of that, and then we went to the Walter Kerr for like a year, and it just got big and done. But I remember I remember because I was just a young punk, and like coming up and going to, I don't know, and it was me and the other actor Randy Becker were like the young guys in it, and then it was the invited dress that we knew that something was up. It was this insane thing, and I didn't know any better. It was my second job, but it was a thing where you could feel that it was going to be a thing in New York. That play was really resonating with people.
Can I sneak in a quick question? Do you remember a moment when Terrence did something or changed something that affected you, that you observed?
No, I was just scrambling to figure out what I was doing at all, probably. But I remember big chunks of the play being rewritten during the rehearsal process and coming in with whole new things, just like they were talking about with Nathan's big speech at the end. Yeah. But no, I was just trying to tread water, especially with all those people, because they were all hams and they were all really, just trying to be heard.
You have a lot of nice things to say about people.
I love them all.
Never leave the party before him. That's right.
I saw Justin in this play also at the Manhattan Theater Club. I saw it twice actually. You were wonderful. Wonderful.
There's such a span of Broadway history being covered here because it's such a long-lasting career, and I'm wondering what has been tricky as far as the visual record of theater. I think in recent years, obviously, we see things like Broadway HD or whatever, but for the early shows, what did you have to work with?
Well, let me just mention that there are a number of things that, if it didn't exist, or if you couldn't find it, or you couldn't legally use it, you couldn't put it in the film, so we had to reinvent something. I will say that I remember watching all of Lips Together, Teeth Apart in the Lincoln Theater Library, but you're prohibited from using it except having it in your memory. So one of the real great treats was to see the entire cast, including Susie Kurtz, who's in the room right now. Where are you, Susie? Could you stand up? I can't see, but yeah. So I remember seeing you in Born on the 5th of July as well. Just, magnificent. So that's haunting, and you'll never forget that. But so we just had to fight for everything, and we finally worked out. I think we're only the third film that ever got a deal with the Coalition of Broadway Unions to use clips in the film. But we had to get every electrician and sound designer on every single film, and Hal Prince to sign off and say yes. But anyway, again, just to be able to share those moments and preserve them was wonderful.
How long did it take you to put this together, having had to do that kind of work?
About 2 years, I would say. I mean, Terrence's papers are kept at the Ransom Center at the University of Austin in Texas, and there was a real treasure trove of things there. There they let you take things out, and that's what we found Mrs. McElroy's letter and John Steinbeck's letter, and I mean, Terrence had, and of course there were no computers then. So all these drafts of his scripts are there, multiple drafts, because he just typed different drafts, and a lot of wonderful things. He saved incredible things. I mean, when things that Go Bump with the Night opened, and this is a story, fortunately Paul Libman decided to run the show for 2 more weeks. He dropped the tickets to $1. And I think that sort of kept Terrence's hope up. And during that time, he received a lot of letters from people who saw the show and loved them. And he saved them all, and they're in this library. So that was a great resource for us.
Jeffrey, is there a story that you think that didn't make the film that you think really should have, that captures something about Terrence that maybe isn't in there?
I am the least on this panel connected actually to Terrence. I saw Rita in the Ritz, which I thought was I never laughed that hard in a theater in my life. It just absolutely changed what I thought of comedy. And
but we got a chance to do something extraordinary, which was unusual too. We got a chance to do a farce. That was a farce.
Which is
it was not
another
just a comedy,
layer
it was a
of
farce.
what sort of Terrence McNally can do, that he could write such comedy from also using really fabulous gay characters, that really what I think is, if you don't have Terrence McNally in 1969 and Bringing It All Back Home and 1975 and The Ritz, then you don't have Will and Grace, and you don't have Modern Family, and you don't have gay characters that are funny in and of themselves as part of the world, as part of families. And I think Terrence was instrumental in, as it says in the movie, being sort of the first writer to put proud gay characters that were just flawed human beings on the stage.
Can I relate one anecdote from the production of the
No,
play?
of course.
Oh, you were going to hear it anyway. I just was brought up right. But it's a wonderful story. Well, you'll see why. We had an actor playing the Queen, which was played ultimately by F. Murray Abraham. Chris, the Queen. But that was later, because the original Chris in our production, before he was fired, was a guy that a lot of people knew, a gay actor named Seth. Do you remember, anybody remember his last name? Because he was pretty well known.
Anyone in the
but
room? Seth?
he was gay, and he was playing this queenie, very diva kind of role. And it wasn't working, and it wasn't working, and it wasn't working. And finally, they had to fire him. And then in comes F. Murray Abraham, reads the play that day, comes in, puts a towel around his head like Elizabeth Taylor, and says, "If I were gay, this is the kind of gay I would be." But let me explain, so no one could understand why Seth, who was a gay person and an actor, couldn't pull, and it was because it wasn't working because he couldn't pull it off. He just couldn't pull it off. And I volunteered a reason, and I remember that Bobby Drivers, who directed, and Terrence said, "My God, you're right." And I said, "It's because you guys have been in the closet for so long that Seth just didn't know how to be that kind of gay. He just couldn't do it. He'd been hiding so much for so many years that he couldn't do it. And then comes this straight guy, this crazy Arab. and he was fantastic in it. He was deliciously funny. But isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it makes.
And it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
I remember Tony Heald, who was in a lot of Terrence's plays, said that someone came up to him when he was in Love, Valor, Compassion and said, "Who in the cast is gay?" And Tony said, "Well, when we're on stage, we're all gay."
I mean, Terrence, the actors that have worked with Terrence just love him. And everybody really, subject to their availability, wanted to participate. In fact, you know, it's interesting, when we premiered it at Tribeca a few months ago, and I was Nathan Lane and Joe Montella had not seen it yet, and they were sitting right in front of me, and I was watching them. And the reactions, you know, that a lot of people had was, all of them couldn't believe how many people's careers he had helped. You know, all the stories of all the actors that, "I'll write this play for you, I'll do this for you," and then he actually, well, you know, Rita has her own version of that he actually did that, and so people have tremendous loyalty, and I think Terrence would be the first to say, too, that you know, he finds people's voices. You know, for years, you know, Jimmy Coco was his muse, and Nathan, you know, when he finds the voice of somebody, he starts to write for them, and he hears it in their heads.
Boy, does he ever, that's true. By the way, I played Maria Callas.
Yes,
at the Berkeley Rep.
Yes.
And the library at Lincoln Center has that also.
Yes, we saw it, it was wonderful.
It was a wonderful production.
Yeah.
Oh, there's,
In the back there, yes.
oh, here.
Oh,
About Love, Valor, Compassion, there's that part where you talk about kind of maybe the difficulty with Terrence, and there was that unpleasantness where Nathan didn't do the movie because he had a scheduling conflict? Was that addressed? Did you cut it out?
Well, if I remember correctly, not to, gossip at a Q&A, but they were very close friends, and they did, I think, have a brief falling out during that period, perhaps. Also, Nathan went off to do The Birdcage at that time. And Mario Cantone came in on Broadway, and also Tony Heald, you were talking about, took over for Steven Spinella. So the MTC cast changed a little bit when we went to Broadway, but as we can see now, everything's great, and Nathan's done several shows since then.
Yeah, Nathan's doing okay.
Yeah.
It is.
No, I mean, but the two of them are tight again.
Yeah, many
Yeah.
sense. It is amazing seeing really talented people use the same words and find something special and significant and just as worthy as the other.
Just to keep with that, many people don't know that Murray was originally in Frankie and Johnny. He wrote Frankie for him, Frankie and Johnny for him.
For Murray?
For
Yeah.
Murray.
No
And Murray did it in the small theater at Manhattan Theater Club. But by the time, he subsequently, of course, won an Academy Award. And by the time they were moving the play to the main stage and ultimately to Broadway, he wasn't available anymore, and he just couldn't do it. It was just impossible. So it was really wonderful for us to get him to read a little from the play and have him be with Edie too.
Yeah. And they actually had a sort of a similar falling out. And Murray told us the story about how one night he had a dream about Bobby Dreyfus. And it was like Bobby was talking to him. And he called Terrence the next day. And he said, we've been like brothers ever since.
There was somebody close here.
There was somebody here,
yes.
Dave.
What percentage of the budget went for the rights for your clips?
He said, what, it's a very insider question, but I like it. He said, what percentage of our budget went for the
The
clips?
largest percent.
But we also, we worked really hard to have special arrangements with people, and not to get into the details too much, but it could have been much, much worse, but again, it was an act of kindness from some rights holders to make it doable.
And also some incredible accidents. A very good family friend of mine is John Gottlieb, who for many years did all the sound at the Taper, where Masterclass originated. And that footage of Terrence outside the theater, and also when they're around the piano playing with Zoe's there and Audra, that was in John and Rhoda's boxes in their garage. Rhoda was pregnant with her son who's just graduated from college. And they gave that to us, they gave that stuff to us. And we found a lot of stuff, the stuff with Tom Kurticki where they first meet out at, out on the island, that was, Isa Goldberg found that. There were people just had things. It was pretty remarkable.
You have to be
I would tell you, the most expensive clip we really had was the one with Merv Griffin, and that was really, really expensive. But we couldn't pass that up. It was just too precious.
Can you say what is expensive, and then would you tell us? I'd love to know. Are we talking 5,000? Are we talking 10,000? What?
Actually, do you really want to know this?
Yeah. Oh, I do. Wow.
Later on, we can talk about E&O insurance and all that kind of cool stuff too. Our most expensive clips can go for $25,000, $50,000. You could just die. But that costs us about $10,000.
Right. Well, there was one. Well, no, I don't. Well, there's a very funny story that you tell the story better though about the David Merrick, which we couldn't use because that was really way too expensive, $25,000. But this was an incredible clip where David Merrick was being interviewed by Everly Bailey, and you tell the story. It's a great story.
Everly Bailey had this terrible talk show. It was produced by David Susskind, and he was handsome, and he actually had an earpiece, and he didn't think of the questions. They just fed them to him. But at one point, he was asking David Merrick, the great Broadway producer, in about 1968. He said, tell in this pretentious voice. I wish Murray was here. He said, tell me, who are your favorite playwrights? And David Merrick said, well, Tennessee Williams, and this wonderful young playwright, Edward Albee. And then he paused for a second, and he said, what do you think, Mr. Merrick, about homosexuality in the theater? And David Merrick leaned back like this, and he said, oh, there are no homosexuals in the theater.
Shades of Trump. How interesting. No, just like that.
Anyway, it's not the Go ahead.
Too expensive.
It breaks my heart, but we have time for one more, so make it a good one. Okay, you're waving.
I heard there's a book about.
Well, that was a very self-serving
Thank you,
question.
Joe. No, thank you, Joe.
Yeah, we're very pleased that there's so many stories that we couldn't tell, and actually images that we couldn't use in the film. And so in October, right before the release of the film itself, and actually right before Terrence's 80th birthday, there'll be a book coming out that's at the core of it is the script. But there are also tons of stories about the theater and about how and Terrence. And individual stories about like how Nathan got into the theater and Christine and actually some wonderful stories from this woman right here. So we hope that you'll have a chance to.
What is the name?
Well, you're getting a free copy, by the way.
It's actually the script, but it's an illustrated, annotated script because, I mean, for instance, your story alone could be an entire movie, which I understand is happening.
Yeah.
We've heard the news, the great news. There's
Documentary?
Yeah.
About Your Life,
Yes.
produced by Nathan Roman. But that's a whole thing so, 90-minute to 2 interviews, you just can't include everything because really the narrative of the story is Terrence's story. So.
But you did, I just have to say it one more time, really. I've seen it a lot, because I get to vote also, and I love the simplicity with which you dealt with this story. No doubt you had a terrific subject, that helps a lot, obviously. But I just love what you did, and thank you.
Opening this fall, for your consideration, Every Act of Life. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming tonight.